Playwright Wendy Wasserstein was the guest on Later with Bob Costas on January 11th, 1993. She was promoting her play, The Sisters Rosensweig, and of course it had become famous because of the Heidi Chronicles. I mean, 30 years ago, this lady was called the voice of the generation for playwrights. And just like Bob Dylan, she says in this interview, if she knew who she was, once she could make it up. That's what creativity and artwork and writing is about.
Thanks for staying up later. We're happy to have Wendy Wasserstein with us. She is the Pulitzer Award-winning, Tony Award-winning playwright. Many more awards than that. I'm sure her shelves are bulging, but you throw in Pulitzer and Tony, you've pretty well established all the credentials that are necessary to get somebody to stay up an extra half hour at 1:30 in the morning, or if they're in the New York area, to get them to come see the Sisters Rosensweig, which right now is at Lincoln Center, but moves to the Barrymore Theater on Broadway in March, and it's been very, very well received. You wanted to write something about people a little bit further along in life than some of your earlier work.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I remember the reviews for my other play, the Heidi Chronicles, which sort of took someone from 16 to 40, and there were all these things saying the voice of a generation, and I thought, oh, good God, that's really difficult. And so I thought that I had this desire to sort of move on and do something else. It's also, I know I turned 40.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure of it. I turned 40, and so I thought, oh, I see, well, there's life beyond this, and began thinking about that, too.
You're obviously not the only female playwright, but there are fewer women of prominence doing what you do, and therefore, I guess, that tag, voice of a generation, which is meant as a compliment. You have to have the quality of the work to earn it, but it's sort of tossed out there, I would guess, because there are fewer women, and so it is thought that you speak for maybe a larger number of people than you actually do.
Which is a hard thing to do. I mean, there are a lot of very good women playwrights now, and more, but what happens is, like with the Heidi Chronicles, I remember once these professors from Cornell came up to me and said, well, you know, the first act was my life and the second act wasn't. And you kind of think, well, I can't be responsible for that. But if there were more plays, then somebody else's second act would be her life.
In some measure, are they all your life, either directly or disguised?
I don't think you can say it's like strictly autobiographical. I mean, in some ways, what's fun about writing plays is you get to be all these other people and put yourself in them, like the romantic hero of the Sisters Rosensweig is a fake furrier. He's the inventor of synthetic animal protective covering. And in a way, I get to be him in some sense.
Played by Robert Klein.
Played by Robert Klein.
In fine fashion, too.
Wonderfully by Robert Klein, yeah.
Terrific cast, Jane Alexander and Madeline Kahn. Do you get directly involved in all the casting decisions?
Yeah, I mean, that's the joy of being a playwright, that you're there for all the auditions and you have casting approval. When you write movies and television, you don't. So it's a different thing.
I read a New York Times article that theorized that this pretty much is your family, minus your brother Bruce. There's no role for
no, there's no Bruce
for Bruce, but all the other sisters line up. True?
I'm the youngest of three sisters. And these are three sisters, and my eldest sister, Sandra, is a banker, and the oldest sister, whose name begins with an S in this play, is a banker too. But then after that, it's sort of, my sister, doesn't run the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, and she doesn't live in London, and the other sister is not the host of Newton at Sunrise. And a
radio talk show.
A radio talk show. And I write sometimes travel articles, but I'm certainly not going back to Tajikistan to write my book on women.
And yet the youngest of these three sisters is a writer.
Yes.
And she is going through a period of time where she's trying to decide what to do, and then she reaffirms her intention to write, and that's where she's going to find herself. And obviously there's an element of that in you.
But interesting what I said before about you find yourself in different characters. There's also a character in there who's a British director, and the director of The Scarlet Pimpernel, and a bisexual, and who I'm fond of. But there was one night I was listening to him, and he was talking about the theater and what it meant to him, and that he knew who he was when he was in a darkened theater and he was making it all up. And I thought, that's me. That's the artist. And the sisters are ideas, but I thought closer to me or closer to the intention of the play is that.
You think you do a good job creating male characters?
I like the two men in this play a lot. I mean, that was very intentional. Robert Klein's character is intentionally a very nice man. I'm not angry at either of the men in this play, and neither of the women in this play. It's in that way hopeful.
A frequently heard criticism, and an apt criticism, at least in some cases, is that since the entertainment industry is more or less male-dominated, female characters either aren't as interesting or they're not as accurately drawn as they might otherwise be. And I guess the reverse question is legitimate. Do most female writers do a good job drawing male characters?
Yes, actually. I think because I'll never forget, I wrote a play called Uncommon Women and Others. That was an all-women's play. That was my thesis at the Yale Drama School. And anyway, it was about Mount Holyoke. And later on, it was done on public television. And Meryl Streep and Joe Lockenberry, a lot of good people were in it. But anyway, this was its first showing at a drama school. And afterwards, this dramaturg, this sort of rather academic man, got up and spoke. And he said, well, you know, I can't get into this. It's about girls. And I thought, well, you know, I've spent my life getting into Robin Hood and Hamlet and Lawrence of Arabia, so why don't you try it? So basically, that's what you've learned all your life. So it's not this foreign element sort of writing male characters, because that's what you've read and that's what you've seen. So when I grew up, I saw Operation Petticoat. You know, you'd see these, and I think, well, where are the girls? This isn't about me. I don't know what they're talking about. But that's what was coming in. So, and I think the answer to your question is yes.
It must be a kick for you, and I guess it can't come as a surprise with the success of the Heidi Chronicles especially, but someone like a Jane Alexander stands up and says, Wendy Wasserstein, where do I get in line?
It's amazing. No, I mean, that's sort of, or Madeline Kahn, too, you know. And then after a while, you're working on a play together, and, you know, finally you have to say, no, Jane, this is how I wrote it, you know, or whatever. But, yeah, but it's great, too. That's very exciting.
Rabbi Perlstein says that we should openly discuss our feelings.
I can't tell you what a comfort it is to live in a country where our feelings are openly repressed. End of conversation, gorgeous.
I have it your way. My feet are killing me. I slept 20 ladies through errands and up and down Sloane Street today. One of them, Mrs. Hershkovitz, her daughter was a counselor at Lily's camp. Everywhere she goes, she has to have another piece of Wedgwood. She's got Wedgwood clocks, Wedgwood bells, Wedgwood napkin holders. Meanwhile, her daughter was the biggest dope dealer at Camp Pioneer.
I don't know how you do it. I could never put up with them.
Believe me, they wouldn't like you either, Sarah.
God, I'm sure not.
Oh, I don't mind. My feet are the only trouble. I told Henry if I get this cable job, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to stop wearing cheap shoes. I am marching myself right into Saks, and I am treating myself to Bruno Magli, Ferragamos, and Manolo Blanchichi.
Have you received any, if not criticism, any feeling of misgivings from feminist friends that maybe this is too optimistic? Not hard-edged enough?
Actually not. I mean, my play, The Heidi Chronicles, was controversial because the woman adopted a baby alone at the end, and there were many who said, oh, Wendy's saying you have to have a baby to be happy, and I wasn't actually saying that. I mean, I thought this was a choice that this woman made, that character. This play, I think because there are three sisters, and so there were three different choices being made, and in fact, Fanny goes back to work. Fanny is a stronger person, in fact, for going back to work.
She's the one closest to you.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah. So I think something, you know, what's being said is balanced out.
What were you like as a kid growing up in Brooklyn?
Oh, God.
That's already been written, by the way. I think Neil Simon wrote that, didn't
I'm sure he did, because he wrote the boys' camp. You have to do the girls' camp. What was I like? Well, because I was the youngest of these four kids, I was funny, basically, and got by being funny. That was about it. I don't know that I was a particularly good student. I was a good girl, too, pretty much.
Well-behaved?
Oh, yeah, well-behaved, except that I'd say vicious things behind people's back. I think when I was in college, someone once referred to me as a vicious dumpling, and I think that's probably true. I think I was probably a vicious dumpling.
But if you're a dumpling, it sort of takes the edge off the viciousness.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
It's that nice.
Did you fall in love with the theater early on?
I did, actually. I grew up going to dancing school at the June Taylor School of the Dance. Remember the June Taylor dancers
Do I
from
ever?
the Jackie Gleason
That aerial
show?
shot on the Jackie Gleason thing?
That's it. I knew June. June and her sister had a dancing school on 56th and Broadway. And my sister, one summer, was the June Taylor dancer at the World's Fair. And I used to go every Saturday and then started going like Tuesdays and Wednesdays or something, Tuesdays and Thursday. I wasn't a very good dancer.
But she could introduce you to Sammy Spear if you played your
Yes,
parts right,
exactly. Exactly. So I used to go to dancing school, and then my mother would pick me up on Saturday and take me to Broadway shows. And also I would know some of the chorus dancers from the dancing school.
What kind of stuff did you like? Musicals,
Plays?
serious plays?
I liked musicals a lot. I liked the overture. I liked the costumes. I liked it. But my parents were sort of took me to everything. So there were plays. I remember hating the play Chin Chin because it was all about alcoholics on Sutton Place who landed up somewhere, you know, in a tenement somewhere. And I was very upset by this. I was like 6. I don't know that I needed to have seen this at the time.
What a come down.
It was a come down. I was very upset for them. But I pretty much liked everything. Always plays, even more than movies.
And we're back with Wendy Wasserstein. Have you grown weary of the easy comparisons between you and Neil Simon?
I mean, I'm really sort of touched by it in a way.
They're usually meant to flatter, of course.
Yeah, I mean, because I grew up in New York, and my folks took me to theater all the time, so the matinees I grew up seeing were, in large part, Neil Simon matinees, and he's a wonderful craftsman, too. He also writes a great deal.
As prolific as
He's
hell.
so prolific. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I was once set up with a man, and I was asking him, do you go to the theater much? And he said, no, I only go to Neil Simon plays, and he doesn't write enough. And I really thought, not enough?
Well, if that's the only play the guy's going to attend,
Well, I
that's
guess
restricting him to one a year. So.
I guess, but for someone who's like one every 3 years, that's a lot.
Yeah, you move at a more measured pace
Yeah.
than that. But the comparisons are obvious. The Jewish context, the serious themes, especially now Simon touches on more serious themes, but always with the use of the one-liners and the snappy dialogue. Those comparisons, I guess, jumped out at people from the very start with you, right?
Well, differently. Certainly not with Uncommon Women, because it was an all-women's play. And the ideas that... My plays tend to deal a lot with ideas in some ways, with the idea of feminism running through all of them. And the Heidi Chronicles, truly the history of the women's movement and paralleling the gay movement in a sense. This play would be closer, I would think, to a Neil Simon play. I could see where the comparisons come from, because it's also a well-structured, well-made play. I mean, there's something about seeing this play, in a way, I think it's my reminiscences of going to a solid Broadway show in 1958.
It is that.
It's that. It's like a well-made play on a good-looking set with good actors, you know, and it's odd to think what has brought me to this. Sometimes I watch it and I think someone much older than me wrote this play.
Do you recall the first time you saw something you wrote go into production and how you felt that night?
Gosh, well, that's funny. I used to write plays in high school, but that aren't real plays. Those were, I went to this girls' school, the Calhoun School in New York, that's now co-ed. But they used to have something called the Mother-Daughter Fashion Show that took place every year at the Plaza Hotel. And I knew they'd let me out of gym if I wrote this show.
Right.
And I remember seeing those shows. But the most exciting thing, my first play was read with like real actors when I was 23. In New York at Playwrights Horizons, which continued to be my theater for like 20 years. And that was thrilling. That was great.
Thrilling but satisfying? Or did you have misgivings about it?
I actually didn't have misgivings about it, although I remember my playwriting teacher at the time was Israel Horovitz, and he had brought along a class of his from city. It was all people I didn't know that he brought to see this play, which was sort of... it's the idea that strangers are coming in. I guess I hadn't thought before that when you do real plays, it's not just for your families and your friends that that strangers come to. It's not like the school play.
Strangers who can be less forgiving.
Yes, exactly.
What's it like, even with the successes that you've had and even with the reputation that you've established? Sisters Rosensweig opens and you wait those hours before Frank Rich renders his verdict or whomever else? What's it like?
It's some lower form of plant life. I mean, it's really what, especially now, because Critics Week, this time is the hardest Critics time I've been through. Only because, partially because the Heidi Chronicles did so well. So you really worry about it. And also I knew, because we had 4 weeks of previews, that the audience really liked this play. And so then you begin to see, you know, how differing will the critical establishment be than the audience. And, you know, what's the gulf between them? And that's scary, you know. So you go to these shows, it's Critics' Night. Some people, like Chris Durang and Terrence McNally, always watch the Critics' Night. They want to see the show that the critics see. I actually can't do that. It's very hard for me because I think I could, who knows what I'll start doing. That could be really embarrassing. But this year, I went to my first time. I actually went with Forrest Sawyer and sat next to him for this thing, and I saw the audience was all laughing hysterically, and he was telling me, "See, it's good," and I thought, well, no, you don't know, because then, you know, some critic could say, well, it wasn't a serious play because everyone was laughing hysterically.
Judith Ivey said to me once, and I hope I'm doing her justice and getting the essence of what she said, but I'm pretty sure this is it, that the thing that she objected to in a review was a dishonest appraisal of the audience's reaction. She said, I can't do anything about what the critic thinks of my work or the play. But if a critic says the play is bad, it's one thing. If he or she says it's not enjoyable, and I'm standing there and I know the audience is roaring with laughter, I feel that must be reported. The audience's reaction must be reported as distinct from the critic's reaction. You think that's valid?
I don't know about that. I mean, it's funny. You can't, I guess with a comedy, you can tell if it's working.
Yeah, and that's what she meant.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. I mean, with a more serious play, I don't know. It's hard, you know, because sometimes there are audiences I know that are so up, sometimes, like our first preview of this play, of the Sisters Rosensweig, because then first preview nights are even more terrifying than critic nights, because you have no idea what you've got there. Then this audience comes in and think, okay, let's do it. And they were laughing hysterically. I mean, really hysterically. And I thought to myself, my God, what's happened to this play? Because by the time we got to the more serious and sad parts, they were very restless. Because they thought, what's happened to the we didn't take the curve in the right way. So in that case, maybe one would think, oh, audiences really like this, but from a playwright's point of view, it wasn't working. So you can't always judge that way.
Is the theater where you see yourself, period, or might there be other areas?
Period, but I think of myself as a playwright. I mean, I'm basically a New York playwright, I think. I mean, I've written movies, and I've written some public television, and I've also written columns for magazines, which is fun. But there's something, to me, there's still something about being inside a theater and the lights goes down. And also for a playwright, it's live. You can hear it. You can fix it. It's not something that gets fixed on tape or whatever, and they can't bring in another writer to punch it up. It's yours.
Once something gets going, how often do you come by the theater?
Well, once it's on?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. You see, previews of this play was for a month, so I saw those sisters every night for a month. And then I did go away a little bit. You do want to keep going back. I go by once a week or so to say hi.
So if the Sisters Rosensweig runs at the Barrymore for a year or more.
Oh, I won't see it once a week.
You won't see it once a week?
No. I mean, I'd go by and say hi to the actors. That's the other nice thing about writing plays as opposed to writing books. You can't really visit your books, but you can visit your plays. And you get to have a bathroom on Broadway, which is nice, too.
Boy, there's prestige.
There you go.
Now here's an inside Broadway question. And it sounds goofy, but I'll bet you everybody who's ever come in from Timbuktu and gone to see a matinee wonders about this.
What?
Wednesday matinee. Where do the actors go between then and places for the 8 o'clock curtain for the evening show?
You see, that's really interesting because it also, off-Broadway, they do a Sunday matinee and a Sunday evening show. And then the theater has to bring in food. They get takeout brought in that I think the theater has to pay for, which I only found out this year. But some places, sometimes, like Sardi's used to have an actor's menu. So actors would sort of sometimes go over there. Also,
There's stuff you could get if you were an actor and you couldn't get if you...
yeah.
Well, good stuff.
Good stuff. Yeah, you can get that manicotti on the actors menu. It's really nice.
Discount rate, too?
Discount rate. I don't know if they do it anymore, you know. So this was a while ago. This was like 3 years ago, so I'm not sure. There's also an you have to have an equity cot, so people take naps, too.
And you can get an equity cot?
There has to be an equity cot backstage so that people can, sleep.
Just one cot that they fight over?
Just one cot, and then they all fight over it. I don't know. My friend, the playwright Chris Durang, always walks into rooms and asks for the equity cot wherever he goes. So sometimes they rest between some. Those who live in New York go back to their apartments often. Yeah.
I don't know if I can make it all the way home. If there's an equity cot anywhere around, I think I'll just nod off.
Okay.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you.
Wendy Wasserstein. See you later.
Thanks for watching Cleveland Live Music. It's awfully bright out here. I'd click on another one of my videos. Quit looking into the sun. Your mother told you not to do that. Please hit the subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel more, there's GoFundMe and Patreon information in the video descriptions. Ooh, ooh!